Welcome to Launch Code, a premier business podcast, starring Evan Hafer, Matt Best, and Jared Taylor.
All right, guys, welcome to the next episode of Launch Code. This is an episode that we've had a long run trying to get this thing put together. For some reason, this has been like ships in the night for, I don't know, close to 6, 7, 8 months maybe. So Brad Thomas, Brandon Lundeen from Silence and Light. Did I get everything right?
Yeah, man.
Dude, well, finally, fellas, because this has been a long time coming. We finally got you guys everybody all connected. This was a technology issue. We were FaceTiming and Skyping and doing all these different technology options, trying to get everybody on here. So without further ado, may I welcome the first band to Launch Code in my show. I don't typically interview a lot of bands unless they're veteran related, and you guys just so happen to be have a veteran connection too, right?
Yeah, that's kind of the whole project, the whole band, and kind of how it came together, and everything else is really, all from the veteran community, or still active in some cases.
Why don't we go ahead and start with that, guys? Like, Brad, why don't you kick it off? Tell us the genesis story and then the mission statement.
Sure. So, kind of an interesting story, man. And I'll try and Reader's Digest it. I don't know how long you guys usually do these things, but I'm a talker, so
yeah, please talk
just
away.
Cut me off when you get to that point.
Okay.
Ultimately, what happened? My wife and I do this date night every Friday night, and we'll go out and have a couple cocktails and then go grab some dinner. And every week, was basically me trying to figure out a way that suited me to get back to the community. And through some of the other things that I do, my day job, et cetera, like I do a considerable amount of giving back to the community already. But anyway, every week, for a period of years, we would talk about different things, run for office, do this, try these things. And one day she came into one of the rooms in my house. It's just full of guitar stuff and amplifiers and everything else. And she said, it's a shame that you're not doing anything with this. You play all the time, but, you're not doing anything with it. And it didn't really hit me at the time, but I was driving the following day, and Jason Everman, a bandmate of ours, was getting ready to come into town, and he and I were going to go check out Mastodon in Manhattan. And basically it was like the light bulb went off, and I thought, what better way to do something than to write music? And I'll see if Jason's interested. He's been out of music for a long time, since the Nirvana and Soundgarden days.
Right.
And, let me see if he's interested in doing this, and kind of started right there. And that's exactly the way it went down. He and I hung out, had some drinks before the show, and we were going to go hang out with the guys in Mastodon. He knew a couple of them, and I had a third party that was with us that was buddies with those guys. So we went and hung out, but talked to Jason and said, here's what I'd like to do. I'd like to sell music, write music, sell it, and take the proceeds of which and give those to like special operations and first responder related charitable organizations. Are you down? And yes, he was. So the social media started kind of the next day or day after.
Right. And that's the guy, how we got introduced. So Jay and I have been friends forever. When I say forever, I don't know, 20 years. And, funny story, his backstory was he was in Nirvana, Soundgarden, and then he had a band called Mindfunk before he joined the Army, and then he went on to 275 or Ranger Regiment, and then he was an SF guy. Jay and I knew each other when he was making the transition over from 275 into SF. So we've known each other forever. Jay and I had connected again. We've always stayed in touch. And one of my guys, we were talking about a group of guys when we were out in Virginia, and we were sitting there at the restaurant. He's like, "Hey, man, my buddy's got this band. He's doing some pretty cool stuff." And then he's like, "But I'm kind of involved with it too." So that's how this whole thing came together, which is you and Jay are friends. I'm friends. We kind of all float in the same similar subculture because you work at Cry now, so obviously we know Cry. We've been to Shot Show I don't know how many years in a row, and obviously we wore Cry. So how long have you been there? How long have you been at Cry?
So I retired in 2010, October. I think it was Friday, October 15th, and I was working there Monday, October 17th or 18th. So been working there ever since, and worked with those guys really from the beginning, and helped develop all the products you see, from an active duty side, working as a combat developer my last couple years in Delta.
Wow. So are you living in New York then?
Yeah, I'm in Long Island currently. Lived in Brooklyn, in a nice part of Brooklyn for a couple of years, and that was how Jay and I connected. I knew about Jay the second he hit the Ranger Battalion, because as a former music guy and guitar player, everybody knew about Jason as soon as he got there. And by word of mouth, it was, hey, there's this dude up at 275 who was in these bands, and it'd be cool if you guys got together, that kind of thing. And anyway, we didn't connect ultimately until a third party was like, hey, I know you guys are both in New York, and want to link you up. And so maybe 2011, I think we hung out for the first time.
So when did you start playing music with him?
So, I played music from a very young age. That started at like 4, but he and I didn't connect until that was 2017, May of 2017. When we first, I conceptualized the idea, approached him about it, and it took us, the better part of a year to write everything, get together, rehearse, get everything polished enough, and kind of grow organically.
Right.
Which is exactly what happened, and to the point that, the word is definitely spreading, and the bigger part was the message was spreading of like, hey, trying to bring awareness to, good causes, contribute something, back to the community that I came from, that I love so much. And, it's not like we're trying to pocket something. And an A-list producer from Hollywood hit us up and said, hey, I'm down to help. What can I do? And so he produced our album.
Wow. That's pretty epic. So you guys had like can you disclose who it was, or is it more of,
yeah. His name is Josh Goodwin, Gudwin, and he was a Marine Corps veteran. Did I think 4 years in the Marines, and wanted to be a high speed, Marine of some sort, and got hurt and couldn't follow through on it, and ended up getting out, and then started slaying it in the music industry. He's Justin Bieber's producer on every album. Celine Dion, Maroon 5, like you name it, man. You can check out his resume at his website, joshgoodwin.com. But he's a no shit, hitter in the music industry.
That's incredible, man. Like
just won a Grammy.
Just won a Grammy. That is fucking incredible. I mean, obviously, you guys have a substantial amount of professional clout based on your backgrounds, and then Jay kind of brings a combination of music and professional backgrounds. So, the military community uniting to do something special like this is like that's just a really interesting and cool story. I love hearing stories like that, and I hear them all the time. It's like, so-and-so, and when I say so-and-so, there's a Vietnam vet out in California that helped me recently with, I was looking at some funding alternatives and, talking to private equity guys and doing all this stuff where he's been very successful in private equity, and he's like, hey, listen, I'll just help you out, man. It's I'm not gonna charge you anything. I just don't want you guys to get taken advantage of. And this pretty easy process. He plugged in, helped me out at zero cost. I wish I could have paid him for his time, but he's like, dude, I can't make any more money in my life that will really make an impact for my grandchildren's children. So like giving me an extra, $10,000-$15,000 for this is not going to matter. And I was like, oh, okay, well, I appreciate it. But
That's awesome.
it seems like a reoccurring story, right? Where veterans are transitioning or they've transitioned, maybe some are in, some are out. They somehow find each other for these unique projects that help the community. And do you guys have a defined, I mean, you're a military guy, so what's your mission statement? Like, what's the mission statement for the band?
I would defer to Tyson, who's
Okay.
kind of the TIC or 2IC of operations and everything.
Right.
In terms of that, he's writing and building all that out, and that's something that
really?
we had to propose. Yeah. He's a former MARSOC officer, so
Right.
Go figure, he's in charge of the business plan. But we've stood up a corporation. It's a full up and running corporation, so that we can receive royalties and then give those music royalties to charitable organizations. We sell merchandise, that helps kind of run the show. And
Right.
if we are getting paid to go play a show, we can be compensated without, individually getting taxed out the ass, depending on how things go. So, yeah, man, I couldn't agree more. It was interesting to see the number of people that reached out and said, hey, I want to help. How can I help? I do web design. What can I do? Love your message, et cetera, et cetera. And that's even kind of how Brandon and Tyson and everybody else came on board was just, through this kind of thing organically.
Yeah.
So let's start adding some layers here. So Brandon, how did you get introduced to this, and how kind of explain your affiliation and background too?
So I started out as a Marine. I was a helicopter door gunner and crew chief. I was on Hueys and Cobras, and then I got picked up to go do the Marine One gig. So then I was on 53 Echoes for a while, and then the Marine One H-60s for President Bush and Obama. And then I only did 5.5 years, and then just missed music, wanted to get back to that. And the day I got out of the Marines in 2010, I was on my first nationwide tour, and then spent the next basically 4 years touring for a handful of metal bands. And Trumpet the Heart, Shadows Fall. I got hired to do drumming for them and a couple other bands. And the touring days just kind of came to an end. Like, I wanted to get back in the fight, so I got involved in some other things. And Jay and I, or Brad and I rather, connected through Instagram. I don't remember if I hit him up or if he hit me up, but I'd heard about this thing and I saw that.
He begged me.
Started talking.
He begged me.
I begged him for a job.
Right.
And so, yeah, we did like a phone interview and he kind of explained it. And I was like, yeah, that's awesome. I would love to be a part of that. I miss music. And I love like the purpose and the message behind it. So then we all met up out in Vegas at SHOT Show, me and Jay and Brad and Tyson, and sat down, and personalities and everyone's goals and what we wanted all meshed, and it just kind of took off from there.
So where did you come up with the name? Where does the name come from? Who developed it? Was it a collective, Socratic method? Was it one individual? How'd you guys develop your name?
It was, this really has become, and I don't want to shit on my day jobs at all, but it's really become a full-time thing.
Right.
And, Tyson and I are on a daily basis, whether it's like he's just texting me now about standing up our Shopify site and everything else, so that merchandise and everything times with the album release, et cetera, et cetera. So anyway, he and I were kicking around some ideas, and really it was kind of based on this one song that I wrote that was based on experience that I had watching two former Delta guys who were both Mogadishu Delta guys that I'm friends with. have this moment, and like it was a very emotional moment, and these guys had some bad blood between them based on some things that happened on October 3rd and 4th back in 1993.
Right.
And this just happened like a year and a half ago. Not even that, maybe a year ago. And anyway, so Tyson and I were kind of kicking around the idea of like, it's like this solitude and hope, you know, and it was almost like something of trying to define it, because we don't want to be like, hey, it's a veteran band writing songs about war. That's not what it is. You know, but really trying to break people's perceptions or connotation of, you know, deploying and what's that, you know, what that's like. It's not all gunfights, you know. It's a lot of sitting around and missing your family, missing your children, waiting on the word to go do X, Y, or Z, loneliness, you name it, you know. And anyway, he sent me a picture, and it was an Afghanistan valley, like right at dawn. And I was like, if we could name the band what that picture says. And we started talking about a poem and some other things. It was Between Silence and Light, you know, et cetera, and started talking about some of the wording of that. And it really kind of spoke to us. So it stuck, and it's never, you know, we've never questioned it. It's not like when you write your band name in high school on your notebook and you're rocking it around and people are asking you what it is. And, you know, there's none of that. It's more like, yeah, man, it just stuck. And to me, it says a lot. It's intriguing, you know, it makes people wonder what it means.
Yeah, I thought when I first heard it, I asked Jay, I was like, did you go religious on me? And he was like, no. And I'm not trying to make light of it. I was like, dude, what kind of a band did you? It's like, no, man, it's not a religious band. Like, stop being a dick. And I was like, okay, well, I'm not trying to be. I'm just saying, is that what it is? So when I first heard it, but then obviously as he unpacked it and explained it to me, I was like, okay, that makes sense. So I'd heard that story or a similar version of it. Makes sense to me. And so now you guys have cut 1 or 2 albums. Where are you guys at right now?
We're just finishing up album 1, and we recorded that in LA with Josh in January. Mm-hmm. And our engineer did all the editing, but he was on an undisclosed project for, you know, the better part of 8 weeks. Right. So he couldn't get the edits to Josh until, you know, maybe 3 weeks ago, and Josh is doing all the mixing and mastering now. So the plan is to release in August.
Okay.
We don't have a date set or selected, but it'll go on all the normal channels where people purchase music. And what we want people to do is buy it, obviously not rip it off and throw it up on YouTube, because every dollar we receive from a song that's sold, you know, is going directly to 2 different charitable organizations, and we'll likely rotate those for the next album, which will be, I don't know, fall of next year when that drops.
And how often do you guys get to, because you guys are moving at light speed in different directions, it seems like. You have different lives and different tracks. So how in the hell do you guys get together to actually practice and play?
It all starts. I'll let Brandon take that one. Go ahead, man.
Oh, I was just going to say that's been probably one of the coolest things, is because we all live in different places and we all do have, you know, like our day jobs and lives and stuff. But everyone's been awesome about understanding everybody else's work, travel, and then finding times that we can come together. Like just a few times a year, and we'll spend like an entire weekend, like 12 hours a day or whatever it takes, just sitting down and crushing it. We played in Virginia, North Carolina, and then obviously we recorded in Los Angeles. So we all just kind of coordinate and look forward, like, hey, over the next 2 months, here's everyone's schedule. This weekend works, and then we'll buy flights or drive 7-8 hours or whatever it takes to get it done.
So, and have you guys done any live shows yet?
No, that's the offers are there, and we're kind of in this catch-22 until the music drops, you know, because people are like, hey, man, we want to put you on this bill. Send me a couple of songs. And the word from the producer is, don't send anybody shit. This is like
Really?
TSSCI level of compartmentalized, because once it's out, it's out.
Right.
And we also don't have a finished product. So what they're going to hear is an edited only version,
Right.
not mixed, not mastered, and it's not going to sound its best. So, why put that out there? But yeah, there's a benefit that we're playing in November. And that might be our first thing, but the goal is really to play 10 shows a year, play 3 weeks a year. We have enough large holes in our schedule that we can do that. We have that luxury. We don't have to get in a van and drive up and down the East Coast.
Right. Well, in November, where are you guys playing in November?
It's a private benefit in DC.
Yeah.
I think there are 3,000 or 4,000 people.
Oh,
that'll be there for that. Yeah.
That'll be super cool.
I think Lenny Kravitz is the headliner, and I think we play right before Lenny.
Dude, that's awesome. That's awesome. Well,
yeah, that's the thing is like our military careers, we are aiming high. It's not, play at Clancy's pub on Friday night. Like, this is a legit thing, and really had to make it a legit thing to be taken legitimately, right?
Right.
I mean, if you're going to do it, our motto is kind of balls deep, man. Everything with everything that you do.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was having that conversation yesterday with one of my friends. He's an agent out in out in LA, where most fucking just repugnant agents live. Like, he doesn't represent me. He represents like a couple of my buddies. Actually, one you might know. Do you know Tyler Gray?
Yeah, I know him.
Yeah. So Tyler, he represents like Tyler and a few of these other guys, and Alan and I were talking. He had done like The Walking Dead and some other stuff, and he was asking me. He called me and he was like, "Hey man, like, I've got this guy. He's a former so and so. He's like, is it just normal for guys just to fall off the radar for like a fucking month?" I was like, well, yes and no, right? It's very indicative of some of the people that we in our tribe, because they focus on things, right? And a lot of guys just go like 2 feet in and they just chop all the white noise out of their life, and they're kind of sociopathic about it. And that's one of the reasons why they've been successful. Then you have the other guy that's just kind of a flake, right? So it's like, yeah, he's just going to drop off the radar for a month. And then you have like the third bucket, which is like, hey, I'm still maybe doing some stuff and I just leave, And so I was kind of unpacking and organizing that thought process for him. It's like, dude, it's so interesting to me. He's like, with these guys, he's like, I never know if they're like flaky or if they're still working or if they're just focused. But half these guys, you'll give them opportunities and you never hear from them again. Like, yeah, it's like I've run into that several times. So as you're kind of transitioning out and away and working with the band and working with veterans, what are some of the challenges that you run into? And this it is a question that I ask pretty much everybody, as you transition out of the mill, and this goes for both of you, so you can take it one at a time. What were some of your biggest obstacles that you were facing? And then once you identify your obstacle, like, I really want you to try to think about how you've navigated around that or some of your coping mechanisms.
Well, I think for me personally, and I'd love for Brandon to weigh on this one too, but for me personally, two things, right? I never fully identified as an operator only while I was in the military. And I think that that's a very important piece, where I've seen guys that are absolute warrior, commando, you name it, but they fail in almost every other aspect of their life. They're cheating on their spouse. They're, acting like a piece of shit, and it's just work.
Right.
And I feel like a lot of those guys are some of the people that struggle the most when they get out, because their identity is gone.
Yeah.
Right. They've lost that thing that they've worked forever. They hold on to it, for dear life, and it's everything to them. And so I never really felt that that like loss of identity. I know that the thing that I did for 20 years and identified with for a number of years, was going to go away, and there was going to be a reinvention of some sort. And so for me, it's kind of like this constant evolving reinvention of, who am I today? And I never want to be defined by the thing that I did in the past.
Right.
So I'll get hit up, by people on Instagram, and I'll post something about, my past or some cool pictures of my past or something else. And it's like, the only reason I'm doing that is not to say, look at what I did. It's to say, this is a part of who I am today.
Correct.
And to say, really ultimately with this project, it was to say, my purpose was kind of, faltering. I know that I'm not doing something that was important as, taking direct orders from the president to go smack down target A, B, or C. But I found purpose in giving back to the community, and that gives me a sense of fulfillment.
Right.
And if I can do it based on my resume and some of the shit that I've lived through, then anybody can do it. And that's ultimately why I put stuff up about myself or have pictures of my past. It's really to say, here's who I was, here's who I am today, and I'm healthy, and I'm doing what I love to do, which is music, and it's giving me this healthy, creative outlet for all this negative shit that I've got inside me.
Right.
I'm not trying to drink it away. I'm not drugging it away. I'm not pouring it away. I'm doing something that's healthy, creative, and if I can do it, you can do it too.
Yeah.
That's probably one of the biggest. I'd echo a lot of what Brad just said. Being a Marine was a huge part of what made me, I guess, what I am today, but it didn't define me. The band I played with before didn't define me. What defined me, I guess, was a constant hunger or thirst to, like, what's the next big thing that growing up I wanted to do that everyone tells me I can't do? Or, like, what's something where the deck is stacked against me that I can try to tackle or achieve? Like, not just necessarily for myself, but, for a greater good, so that I can keep contributing, whether it be to the United States or to the world, honestly, in some kind of positive manner. And the big thing is, people ask me all the time, like, oh, it must be nice. Like, you've done music and you're a Marine, you've done all this stuff. And they look at it like it was handed to me. And what I'd like to try to show people is, like, take a risk. Like, the only reason I was able to do any of that stuff was because I guess I had spine enough to take a risk and take a chance and go for it. And so hopefully this shows people, between everybody in the band with everyone's background, that not one thing should necessarily define you. And if you can just calculated risk, but go after whatever it is you want to go after wholeheartedly, and people would be amazed what they can achieve.
Man,
I think the second part of that answer for me, sorry to jump on you guys. The second part of that answer is, like, it's one thing to write a song, and I don't think unless you're creative or artistic, you realize what that's like. But it's like giving people a little piece of you. And when I send something to somebody, like, the way it works and the way we kind of go about writing is I'll write all the stuff, and then when we get together, we all kind of add our collective parts and make it ours, and make it better. And to take that stuff and send it to a Grammy award-winning producer is very, that's nerve-wracking. And, how do I measure up? How do, is he going to like it? And the validation that we got from him was basically, hey, I had a bailout plan, coming out here to do this for 10 days. And the fact that I'm still here and a part of it should tell you everything you need to know. But basically, you guys brought the goods. And to hear that and to hear the outcome of some of these tunes, like, it's absolutely, it's been an experience like no other. Incredibly rewarding.
Yep, I agree.
Yeah, I was just having this conversation, and I have this conversation almost every week with a combination of people. My most recent conversations about this was with a young guy that just transitioned out of Ranger Regiment, went to work up in Salt Lake, in the Salt Lake City facility. And then I was talking to an older SF guy that got out around 2004. But it was kind of the same thing because people ask me that question a lot. And, you know, I've never heard it put like that where you said, that's kind of your first point where you said, I never really considered my identity rolled into this profession like at 100%. You can still have 100% commitment, but when you absorb your identity and everything you are into that, that's when I think people really they run into trouble. And I saw it, I saw it in my previous profession where guys would get so consumed with their military background, whether they were a SEAL or Green Beret. The agency is another one. Guys get rolled into that 3-letter acronym so well, and they don't know who they are outside of that profession, that green hat or that special forces tab. And I tell guys this all the time. I'm like, if your identity is a hat, you got something wrong. You really, you've got something wrong that you need to fix internally. You can't say I'm a Green Beret. Like, that's a hat. That statement doesn't necessarily make sense. And it doesn't make sense after you've made the transition into a different profession. And, taking the skills and what you've learned and your life experience that's been galvanized for many of us with combat, and then transforming yourself, or, as I like to use the analogy, constantly improve your fighting position, right? It's evolution. It's, if you're concerned with personal and professional development and evolving outside of that, and one of the things, you guys hit on all of them that I always tell people. Like, the first thing you need to do is, like, do not dive into a bottle. Like, I tell a lot of guys, like, don't even drink. Like, don't even attempt yourself. Like, just cut it out of your life, because honestly, it's just dead weight, and you don't need it. You've got too many things to do. You're transitioning out of a tribe. You're evolving into a different profession. You're shedding some of your former your professional identity and your identity. When you start crawling into a bottle, that's like a dead-end road. There's nothing good that can come from that. Drugs and alcohol, depending on the type of drug, I'm not necessarily all of them are bad, but when you're abusing them, obviously that's a dead-end road. And I've never seen anybody, and I think at 100% agreement, which is none of my friends have used alcohol or drugs as a coping mechanism. Not once has it ever fixed somebody's life. That's 100%. So you're guaranteed that's you're guaranteed to not find fulfillment or happiness down that road. I think. I don't know. You guys can react to that.
And you're basically just delaying the inevitable.
Yeah.
So it may work for a couple of years and you have fun and you're partying like a rock star and everything else, but ultimately, when that thing stops scratching the itch, then you're left with the same shit that you had before that. And that's one of the reasons why one of the charitable organizations that we're contributing to is called Warrior's Heart. It's an actual Heart. Yeah, it's an actual physical place. Right. And there are two things that I love about it. One, they get guys help with whatever their addiction or substance abuse or use. They kind of clean people out first, and then they start into, PTSD and therapy and things like that. And it's not just a veteran thing; it's first responders and it's other folks. So I love that. I don't want it to be something where it's like a veteran inclusive. You got to have so many years in or anything else. I respect cops, firefighters, everybody that's service related in that regard and gives to the community in a huge way. Deserves that. And the second is they use art as a form of therapy, which, I know personally has helped me. And it's the only thing I can do when I pick up the guitar, and I do it daily. I can just escape, man. I don't have any thoughts in my head. I don't have negative thoughts. I'm thinking good things, even if it's heavy subject matter that I'm kind of gearing stuff towards. It's just one of the things I can do that I feel totally free. And, So whether it's music or art or sculpting, they do stuff in that regard to help guys be able to, take some of that negativity and get it out, in a healthy and positive way.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. The writing process is really helpful for a lot of guys. When they start journaling and keeping daily journals and things like that, just getting it out on paper, just going through that process helps. We're a pretty eclectic.
I think that's why so many dudes write books too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it helps. I mean, I know Matt just wrote his book. I just finished it. Well, he finished it like a year ago, but he said, man, it was a fantastic experience because it allowed me to kind of unpack all of these things, look at them in sequential order, weigh them out fairly objectively by looking back into it, put it on paper, and just put it out to people. Like, here it is. I'm not that cool. I'm just a guy. So read it. But I know so many guys that, one of my really good friends, he goes by the pen name Jack Carr, fantastic guy. He's a New York Times best-selling author, but he made the transition, year and a half later, published the book, something like that. And that's another thing he keeps telling me. He's like, man, it's really therapy for him to sit down and write fiction. And I do other things, right? So I've got other things that keep me preoccupied and keep me driven and focused. The company itself it's a form of therapy for me because I keep building and processing information and making decisions. And ultimately it moves me further and further away from my past because I have to be so immersed and so committed to this that I just don't have time. And by the time, 10 o'clock rolls around and I have to be up at 4:30 or 5 in the morning, dude, I just don't have time and I'm fucking exhausted. So I can't spend a lot of time thinking about anything in my past. I can just think about what do I have to do tomorrow, next week, next year. And I think it's really important for guys, and this is really the niche audience that we speak to, is how guys transition in a successful way, and talking about your transition story, what you're doing now, and then looking at some of the things that are out there for veterans that you've used. So you've been working for Cry for I don't know how long. You're looking at when I say I don't know, you just told me how long, but how many veterans do you come across in your daily life that are transitioning or transitioned that are having legitimate issues? And you've got probably a fairly close footprint into your previous profession as well, right? I mean, guys from your background
for sure.
are still having issues. Guys are having issues.
Yeah, for sure. That's one of the things. So I guess there are a couple of different points that I'd like to make, in regards to that. One, it's very interesting to me to see some of the people that have hit me up that are struggling, because I would have never guessed it in a million years. And, the level of dude, it might be a retired full bird colonel, and you would think, oh, this guy has got his shit together, and what does he have to worry about? He's making, colonel retirement pay.
Right.
Could be 23 years in the building CSM, who's struggling with stuff. And so, there's no right or wrong answer in that regard. And it's not like, oh, it's only these guys. It's only guys that did this, or junior NCOs, that's not it at all. It can be anybody. And the second part of that is that I feel like, and I don't want to speak negatively about the unit that I came from, but they set the example for the Army to follow in so many ways, whether it's what type of weapons they're using, what kind of gear they're wearing. It could be anything. Two things. One, I chose a profession that kept me tied into the community, right? Because I feel like if I had gone completely isolationist and moved to Idaho and, been on my own, I don't think that would have been a healthy outcome. So although I live in a place where it's not like I'm surrounded by veterans, I'm communicating with people in that community on a daily basis, probably as much as you are with the people that you communicate with. I mean, it's ridiculous. It's a 24-hour a day job. But the unit, as an example, should be doing something, and I've communicated with them a number of times, and the leadership there, to say, you should put something in motion that sets the example for the Army on how to do this the right way. And the fortunate and unfortunate part of it is their job isn't to transition guys out of that unit.
Right.
The Army's job is not to make sure people feel good when they go out the door. It's to kill motherfuckers, capture dudes, and do all of that stuff, not the other thing.
Right.
But they have started to make steps in the right direction. And, I think ultimately, you have to be removed from the situation to see the problem. And I think about, here are a couple of guys I mentioned earlier that had some bad blood that dated back to 1993 in the streets of Mogadishu. Think about it now. You've got 19 years of war, going on 19 years of war, and think about the number of issues that are going to continue to be a part of the community for years and years and years to come.
No, I think that I think you're absolutely right. I think that the unit that we come from, or the units that you come from, I come from, their job is to maintain mission focus on what they have to accomplish. The burden of transitioning and then helping, that's a collective responsibility from the society that's ultimately made the decision to send men and women into harm's way. That's not just they have an ethical and honestly, a brotherhood responsibility in this, but it's a big issue, man, and it honestly takes away from the main mission of the units. So for me, when I look at it, I'm not saying all the responsibility is off and everybody can do a much better job, but for 2 decades roughly, we've been, by choice as a society, we've been sending guys into harm's way, whether it's needed or not needed. That's not necessarily for us to decide, because we went, right? But as a society, I think you really have to kind of look at how we're taking care of guys and the amount of load that we put on them throughout the course of their profession. And when I look at my friends now that are 40, in their 40s, late 30s, 40s, guys are still having issues from things that were 2004, 2005. And some guys are only starting to have these issues, and they're legitimate issues from things that happened, 13 years ago. And I think there's sometimes a reluctance for guys from our subculture too to just admit it, to say, "Hey, dude, I'm having problems," right? Because they're too proud, or maybe their ego's too involved. But really, I think it's kind of our collective responsibility too to say it's okay. Come forward, get help, because you can establish the lead. You can still lead people to fixing their problems and helping a lot of people within, I think you hit on it, between the military, especially the special operations community, the civil servant sections of our society. People need to step forward. I mean, I don't know how many cops that I've talked to where, they have kids, and one of my closest friends, he left the state police. He just had his newborn, and he went out on a traffic accident, and he had, basically had to take out a couple child body bags on a head-on collision with a semi, and he could not do the job anymore. That was he was like, dude, I could not do this job anymore. Like I could not go out and do the things that I was doing because it was paying such a heavy toll on me, and it was actually weighing on my family too, because I was tired of scooping people up off the street. And I don't think people actually think about that portion of the job very often.
Yeah, well, I think you're exactly right, and that's like at the extreme end, right? So that's at the extreme end of like what people face. I can give you two examples that happened to me personally in the last 7 days of something that's like challenges that you will face as a veteran, or at least, that I think most people that are in the service would never think about.
Right.
One, TRICARE, right?
Yeah.
Oh, you get this great healthcare for life. It's great. And I'm not going to say anything isn't good with it, because I hardly ever use it and use a different form of healthcare, but I do use it to cover one of my kids.
Right.
And today, no shit, today, took him to the doctor because he's going into his senior year and has to have a meningitis shot. We get there. He hasn't been in 2 years. We'll go to an urgent care if he's sick, or, generally can get meds and things, and you kind of know what's needed. But go to the doctor today and they're like, oh, your insurance says that you're not covered anymore. You're canceled. So I get on the phone with TRICARE, come to find out that when they rolled over, they merged like North and East services of TRICARE. When that happened, I got dropped, and I have no idea. Like, I don't have a CAT card, right? I can't insert it into a computer and log into some magical account that got set up, in 2010 when I retired. All I see is that I get a retirement check, every month, and they pull out, a portion of that to pay for healthcare. And so I found out today that my son has been not covered, nor am I, under TRICARE for the last 2 years because of the way the plan was rolled up. So I paid out of pocket for doctor expenses today. And then he's got to have lab work done and some other things that will be out of pocket until TRICARE can fix and rectify the situation, right? And then where I live in New York, TRICARE isn't exactly the most accessible thing in Long Island or in Manhattan. And so if you retire or separate from the military and decide that you want to stay in Fayetteville, North Carolina, TRICARE is a great thing because every doctor there is going to accept it, right? But people don't think about that. They don't think about I'm moving out to Idaho to my ranch so I can shoot guns.
Right.
I'm like, yeah, show me all the TRICARE doctors out in Idaho, in your town. And so anyway, that's something I try and educate dudes on. The second is, where I live in Long Island, it's a fairly expensive part of the country, probably one of the most expensive parts of the country. And for years, I've been hearing about these veteran discounts for property taxes.
Right.
My property taxes are upwards of $16,000, $17,000 a year. And all these people that I know, like, oh, no, they have these veterans discount programs.
Right.
Well, I check it out. I go to this link for the town that I live in, and they have eligibility. So if you meet one of these criteria, then you meet the basic requirements for this discount on your property taxes. The service dates that they have are basically from World War II up into Desert Storm. Anything after Desert Storm isn't even included on their website.
What?
So that's what the town is considering a veteran. It's not modern.
Right.
It's not modern times, like the last 19 years of war. And fortunately, I served during Desert Storm. Like I was in the Army in basic training, or I was in AIT then.
Right.
But that didn't count. There's no Mogadishu. That was still part of the Vietnam era of work. Mogadishu service didn't count towards that. Iraq, Afghanistan, all the other places I've been, none of that counts. So if I served during World War II, Korea, Vietnam, or Desert Storm, I could get this discount. But those are just the frustrating things that I think veterans face on a less extreme level than the example you gave about your state trooper buddy.
Well, I mean, I run into the same thing where, as I was starting my business, I looked at the SBA's website, looked at, if you're honorably discharged and you're looking to get a loan, you can get preferential treatment as far as loaning is concerned. It still has to be loaned to you from a bank. But I went through reams and reams and reams of paperwork trying to figure out how do I actually apply for this loan. It's gotten much better in 6.5 years. It's gotten much better, but even then, they made it so difficult for the average person that I just said, screw it. I'm not even going to apply. So I just forfeited the process and said, I'm going to go a different route. I'm going to try to just make the company monetize on its own. I'm going to try to just do it without funding. And then eventually I'll just go a more conventional way to loan money. And that's exactly the way it worked. Well, the funny thing is now I sit on the Small Business Association's Veteran Affairs subcommittee ultimately. And so when I told my story, I'm like, yeah, I didn't even apply because it was too big of a pain in the ass. And I'm not a guy that's not willing to put in the work. I'm just not the guy that's going to put in a bunch of work without knowing exactly what the payoff is going to be. And if I have to circumvent the system to make it more effective for myself, that's what I do. And so I've chopped the government away from most of my life, where I find it so dysfunctional and the layers of bureaucracy so frustrating that I've essentially just said, you know what, I'm going to do it without the government. People always ask me that too. Like, man, you guys should try to get in the MREs. And I'm like, dude, I don't like doing business with the government. The government doesn't like paying their bills on time. They don't like, you're not dealing with people that can actually make decisions most of the time. It's just an exercise in frustration. Now, once you do get a contract, sure, depending on how it's written, and I mean, you guys obviously over at Cry have cracked that code, but you guys also do a lot of work with the government. You get your foot in there, like you've got an established relationship. But just establishing the relationship is a fucking nightmare. I don't know how many guys I've talked to. They're like, I'm just trying to sell widget X to the government, and they just can't get it done. And you're like, man, I don't get why you can't get this thing done. The government needs it. Or needs a service.
Or you have to be a listed vendor on a city's website that costs you $600 a year to be listed.
Right.
But they're going to buy like 12 of something. So you really need to get on there so that they can buy 12 of something. And it's like, dude, that literally just ate up every piece of profit that was in that,
Right.
And then it's like, why won't you guys do this? Why don't you guys help out? There's a lot of that. And same thing of like delinquency and bills. And that's another, I won't even get into that stuff, but
yeah, you're probably very familiar with that.
And thankfully my job doesn't like really expose me to a lot of that. Mm-hmm. So, I hear about it and I can kind of see some of the communique, but don't have to get involved, thankfully.
Well, government employees are not running a business, and lot of government employees think that businessmen just have a lot of money. That's what they think. They just think, oh, well, they have a lot of money, and the government's really good at spending money. They're not good at making money. They don't understand how hard it is to actually make money. So there's this substantial conflict between people making decisions on contracts on one end and the people trying to sell something on the other end, which is, down the rabbit hole in a different topic, but, it's still the frustrating aspects. And I think a lot of guys get disillusioned in this, where they're going to transition away from the military. They're going to, have health care for life. They're going to have their retirement, and they're going to go back to, kind of a pseudo contracting role for the government or do something for the government. They think it's easy. And what I'm trying to kind of get out and squash the myth where, nothing worth having in life is easy, right? So even just getting a VA rating, you still have to go in after you ETS out of the military, go in and have another rating done. And then you have to often fight for your rating. I mean, I had an ongoing debate with my doctor. It was like, I have 60% hearing loss on my right side, and she was like, "Well, it could come from, your other work related outside of the military." I'm like, I haven't done anything else for my entire life. I run a business now that requires like zero noise. What are you talking about? Like, what are you talking about? This is the only thing I've done for 20 years.
Oh yeah.
Like, what are you talking about? My other profession? Are you crazy? Where did this come from? And why is it only on my right side? Is it from, driving and having the AC in my 2009 Volvo with 130,000 miles on it? I don't think so. I don't think that at all. Well,
yeah, I got a 10% disability rating for hearing loss, and I served in a time, where before Peltors, before hearing protection that you could actually use. So I think about like Mogadishu, for 18 hours being exposed to a pretty insane level of continual gunfire, RPG explosions, you name it. And I get maybe a $70 a month check for that. Like, woo!
Yeah, there goes my hearing. No big deal. $70 a month. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well,
for the price of one cup of coffee a day.
It's not even one cup of coffee. You'd have to order it from us and get it down to that price point. Like, you can't even buy a cup of coffee for 70 cents, especially not in New York.
Yeah. No doubt, man.
We're at an hour, man. I don't want to cut it off. I think this has been a fucking rad conversation. Where can people find you guys to keep looking for when the album's going to drop, for your live shows, follow you guys on your social? Where's everything landing?
So it's we've got a Facebook, Silence and Light Official. Yep. The Instagram is probably the main social media page. I run that, so yeah. I always throw it out there because I answer a lot of DMs from kids that are looking to come into the service and asking questions to people that are struggling that I've directed to Warrior's Heart, right. So it's anywhere in between, but I always throw that out there. We have got a website, silenceandlightmusic.com, and all of that stuff will be on all of those sites. So album release, that'll be, here in a couple weeks. All the timing of merchandise and everything else and live shows hopefully is all coming to kind of a point, where it's all timing at the same time. That was the intent.
Well, you have to keep us up to date, man. I'd love to have you guys back after it drops. I think that'd be great, just to kind of check in and see what you guys are up to. So we'll try to schedule you guys again for after this comes out. So. Silence and Light, check them out. Check out, Cry. Obviously, this is not a promo for Cry, but they make a lot of cool shit, and you're directly part of it. So check out them on the social feeds. Check out Cry, and this is Evan Hafer signing off for Launch Code. Thanks a lot, fellas.